everybody, it's Sarah Cray with Let's Make Art, and I wanted to do a watercolor journal review because I have been painting in watercolor journals for a few years. I've tried a few different larger brands, and I just wanted to share with you my findings so you guys can decide what will work for you. Now, I do want to acknowledge that really what this comes down to is personal preference, but I want to show you what I look for in a watercolor journal, so to help you make the best decision, okay?
Perfect.
So the two things that I think about when it comes to a watercolor journal, the biggest one that's important to me is the actual size of the journal. I have found that when it comes to watercolor journals, they have a tendency to be long and skinny. I don't know why. I honestly don't know why, because I'm like, why are all of these long and skinny? Because it's like great watercolor paper, but the orientation, I just feel like that's very limiting in terms of compositionally what I can paint inside of it. And I don't know. I'm not a huge fan of like long, skinny journals. Okay.
Okay.
And then the second thing, honestly, that's the most important thing, is the size of the paper and the journal and how it feels to paint inside. Because when you're painting too tiny or too, that part is really important to me. Then the second part is the watercolor paper itself and how well it takes water and the watercolor. Now, I'm going to admit that if you buy like pads of 100% cotton paper, I've never found a watercolor journal that is exactly like that watercolor paper you can find on those pads. Even if it says that it is, it's not the same to me, and I don't know. And if there is a journal that you have come across that does have that, please let me know. I know that there are actually some bookbinders on like Etsy and like have their own website where they actually take that paper from the pad and sew it into a journal. But I mean like buy the journal ready to go in stores kind of thing. Okay. So the first brand I want to talk about, and I'll do a little flip through of my journal so you can kind of see what the experience is like. So these are Moleskine journals, or Moleskine, depending. I mean, there's different ways to pronounce it, and I apologize if we're not doing it correctly. We did try and watch videos on how to say it right, and we got mixed results. So this is one of those situations where I do actually really like the quality of the paper, but they only come either in this long, skinny orientation, or they have one that can stand up like this. But again, I feel like this painting space is very narrow.
Yeah.
So if you like kind of a more narrow, or you know that you're only doing landscapes, but even this as a landscape, like this is such, I don't know, it's such an extreme long skinny composition that I do feel limited. So as you can see, I'm able to paint front and back on these. There's not any warping that happens while I paint and layer. There's a tiny bit, like if I were to feel my paper and you were to see that, there's a slight bit of warping, but it's not too bad. Again, what stopped me from painting in these and continuing to paint in these is simply the size of the paper. I didn't enjoy this size. Okay? But in terms of paper quality, it's definitely there. So if you're interested and you don't mind a little bit narrower of a page, then this might be a brand you want to look into. The second brand I'm going to talk about is Hahnemuhle, which has my favorite watercolor paper, the collection. What's nice about this is I actually really like the size of the paper for this square journal. I personally love a square format. I like to paint in square format a lot. The paper takes the water really nicely. You can do both sides, as you can see.
Can I just pause you and say these are beautiful?
Thank you. I actually think that I also wanted to share with you some of my sketchbooks in general, or my journals, because I find people's journals to be very inspiring. And there's something about like the messiness and also the freedom that comes within painting a journal, where I think people tend to be a little bit more willing to try new things. And so it's just interesting what you can come up with. So I do really like Hahnemuhle paper. And then the really cool thing is they also have different types, where this is an accordion journal, which is just really cool because look.
Super cool.
So this would be really nice. Like I painted this, we went to Italy. And so this entire journal was just scenes from this trip. So something that's not great about journals is there's a lot of pages and we think we have to fill them all up, and then we start and then we're like, oh my gosh, I still have 50 pages to go, I'm never going to fill all of this up. It becomes overwhelming. So sometimes doing a smaller journal that's meant to be for a specific place just makes it so much more manageable, and it makes it like more fun. Like, oh, this is only, 8 painting sessions instead of 60. And even though we want to say, oh, it's a journal, it's a sketchbook, it doesn't really matter, it does matter. We care. Like, we want our journal to feel nice. We want it to be nice. And even though, like, I'm going to ask you to fight against that temptation, because it's important to have full freedom when you're creating. I like to think about ways to live with those realities, which is if it's too overwhelming to fill up a whole journal sketchbook, look into a smaller one, and then it doesn't seem as scary. Okay?
Love it.
So this is a really good one. I like this one a lot. I will say, though, that it's not my favorite. My favorite is this one right here. This is Etcher. It's actually a mixed media cold press journal. So it's watercolor paper, and they make a cold press and a hot press version, but they call it a mixed media journal. So I just want to acknowledge that. But this one is my favorite because I love the size of it. The size of the paper is very much aligned to how like a 9x12 piece of paper feels. So this feels like a good ratio to me while I'm painting, and I feel a lot of freedom compositionally of what I can create in here. Simultaneously, this takes the best paint when it comes to watercolor paper that I've come across. I can layer. I can do it back to front without any bleeding. I can do many, many layers, and or even light washes, and it's not a problem. I can use many different types of paint. I've used watercolor and gouache in these, but the biggest thing is just honestly the size is my favorite size, and that combined with the fact that I can paint front to back and it takes watercolor really well, it just makes it a really easy choice for me. So I probably have about 4 of these that I have filled up with just paintings that I do in the morning.
That water drop one is so cool.
This one I
Yes.
just did. I
Love
just did
that.
this one yesterday. So, and remember, when it comes to watercolor journals, I'm going to just talk a few minutes about my process when it comes to painting, okay? For my journals, because I know that's a question I get a lot too, which is, my job is painting in many different ways. I like to sell original artwork. I like to do collaborations with other brands, surface pattern design, and of course I teach. And so I'm painting a lot. But one thing that's really important in order for me to stay engaged creatively and not burn out is I need to have freedom to paint whatever it is that I want to paint. So usually my process when I go into my studio is first thing in the morning, I grab a journal and I paint for probably 20 to 40 minutes, and I usually just do a page. And it can be a landscape, it can be a floral, it can be me exploring different techniques and designs. It can be whatever I want. There's no rhyme or reason to what I paint besides the fact that I simply wanted to paint it that day. That's it. In terms of, well, how do you decide what it is that you paint? Well, honestly, for those who paint, I know you have a folder on your phone that is just reference photos of things that you want to paint. So I have one of those. I also have a Pinterest board. And because these are not paintings that I'm selling, I'm not claiming these as my own, I give myself a little bit of freedom to paint whatever I want. So if I see a photograph I really like, I'll paint it in here. Again, I'm not going to sell that because a photograph is an artwork that you can't just copy, right? That belongs to the photographer. But if I'm really interested in learning a technique, or I was really drawn to the color, then I have freedom to paint it in the privacy of my journal for practice. And then whatever I take in here, whatever I paint, it informs my overall creativity and style. So I can learn to try painting a tree this way, or try doing color washes this way, or maybe I really love this here. I never painted like a parrot tulip before, so I was practicing before I did it on a larger sheet of paper. This was inspired by an artist named Joanna, who's fabulous, and she was totally fine that I used one of her paintings as an inspiration in my journal, which was really wonderful. So honestly, just keep a phone folder of pictures or paintings that you're interested in recreating. Another thing is I have books, like physical books of like famous artists like Monet, who I really love, where I can just flip through and just be like, oh my goodness, I really love this lily painting. Why don't we try and paint water or something like that, you know? So just kind of having something on hand that as soon as you see it and it grabs you, you don't overthink it, you just go straight to painting, okay? So that's my favorite. Etcher, mixed media, cold press. This is a 6x9 journal. It's my favorite. It's my favorite one. I love it very, very much. And I do want to acknowledge that sometimes it's a good idea to try journals that are not traditional to what you would usually use. Here I have a hot press journal, and this is a Codex journal with handmade paper. So these are not traditionally journals that I would use simply because the paper type in them is different than like a pad of 100% cotton cold press watercolor paper, which is my preferred paper. But it's an excellent practice to teach yourself how to be flexible when it comes to other paper types. I think it's very important as an artist for me to understand the tools that I use so then I can adjust to best work with the supplies, okay? Because we have a tendency, like we get used to how a supply works, and then when we come across another art supply that doesn't do what we think it should do, we're like, that's a bad art supply. But I really want to fight that stigma because sometimes people can't afford 100% cotton paper, but that doesn't mean they shouldn't enjoy the wonderful world of watercolor. So instead of saying, oh, that paper is not professional grade or it's not 100% cotton, so it's not going to react well and it's just kind of trash, I'm going to say, let me show you how to paint on that, because you can still create really amazing art. It doesn't really matter what your supplies are. And so sometimes I'll grab watercolor journals that are a different, just different than what I'm used to teach myself. What do I need to adjust about my process and my painting so then I can be successful on this type of paper or using this type of paint? So this, because this is 100% cotton, this is a beautiful paper. It feels so good to paint on it. It's a handmade paper. Sorry, that's what I meant to say. I can do really gorgeous light paintings on here. It does bleed through if you do heavy and lots of, I'm trying to see if I can find one. If you do lots of layers, it will bleed through, okay? So sometimes people will stick like a piece of paper underneath so to make sure, but if you keep it kind of more light and just kind of more gestural, then you can get some really gorgeous paintings with the most delicious texture with them. The other journal here, and this is a plug that I designed this. This is my painting on top of this. This is a collaboration I did with a journal company called Archer and Olive, and this is a hot press watercolor paper. So a hot press watercolor paper is very smooth and it reacts to water differently. However, I like it for when I'm trying to do writing with my painting because it's so much easier to write on a smoother surface than it is to write on a very bumpy surface.
Right.
So, and with this, it's the same, like it's teaching me how to use hot press paper, okay? So you can still create really beautiful paintings. And of course, the paper is gonna react differently. It's gonna slide differently. It's gonna dry differently. But it's all experimentation. It's all playing and teaching yourself. And it's all about trying something new. And all of these things even if you decide not to create with hot press paper regularly, it's just teaching yourself new things. It was Halloween when I painted this. Can you tell?
The vibes are on.
The vibes
Halloween
are.
vibes.
That's right. So I just want to show you the value of trying different supplies and tools than you usually would. And also just to share with you what I look for in a watercolor journal and what I have found to be my favorite. If you have a watercolor journal that you're like, no, this is the one, please comment. I would love to give it a go and let you know how I use it and my views on it. If there's other products that you're interested in me doing one of these kind of reviews about, if you're curious about something, if you're not really sure, and you would just wish somebody would make a video about, you know, different types of salt or whatever, please also put that in the comments. I would love to start doing more review types of things for you guys so you can incorporate and go about your own watercolor journey with a little bit more knowledge. And I think that's it. Michael, thank you for being here and doing the cameras.
Anytime.
This is new for me, but like and subscribe. I own this YouTube channel now, and I bought Let's Make Art recently with my husband Michael, and so we are kind of just doing things a little bit differently, but it's all just about giving you guys the information you need and supporting you in as many ways as we can to create more artists in the world, because you absolutely are creative. If you paint, you're a painter. It's as simple as that. And so we really appreciate you guys supporting us, being here. And I think that's all I got to say. Thanks for being here. I'll see you guys next time. Bye.